I never thought I would use the signal again. When I was 9 years old, my father taught me how to scratch my left ear twice if I felt unsafe. If something felt wrong but I couldn't say it out loud, I was supposed to sniff once and tap the table lightly with my index finger. He called it situational awareness training. I called it weird. My dad wasn't weird, though. He was careful. Paranoid, some people said. But paranoia is just experience that survived. He spent 26 years as a financial crime investigator for a federal task force in Chicago. Fraud rings, Ponzi schemes, offshore shell companies. He once told me, while carving a Thanksgiving turkey, the people who steal with a smile are the most dangerous. They don't need guns. I laughed back then. I don't laugh anymore. I'm 38 now. I live in Evanston, Illinois. I manage a mid-sized construction supply business that my uncle started in 1984. I'm not rich, comfortable, stable. I have about $310,000 saved across retirement accounts and a brokerage portfolio. It took me 15 years to build that number. Early mornings, snowstorms, payroll stress during COVID. Then I met her. Her name was Alyssa. We met at a charity fundraiser downtown in March of 2023. She wore a navy dress and spoke calmly about private asset placement opportunities. She said she worked as a private asset supporter. I had never heard that title before, but she said it smoothly, like it was common language in rooms I didn't belong to. She was 33, smart, attentive. She asked about my business, my family, my dad. When I mentioned my father used to investigate financial crimes, she paused for half a second. Then she smiled wider. That must make you very cautious, she said. I shrugged. Not cautious, just raised differently. We started dating in April. Dinner in Andersonville. Walks along Lake Michigan. She liked jazz and expensive red wine but never offered to split the check. That didn't bother me at first. I liked feeling generous. By July, she was staying over most weekends. By August, she brought up investing. It was a Thursday night. We were at my kitchen table. 8:47 p.m. I remember because my microwave clock is 3 minutes fast, and I never fix it. She had printed documents in a clean white folder labeled Lakeshore Private Capital Fund. She placed it carefully between us. I don't usually bring work into relationships, she said. But this, I thought of you. I felt something shift in my stomach. She explained the fund targeted short-term commercial bridge lending. Real estate-backed. High liquidity. 12 to 14% annual return. Minimum buy-in, $240,000. Locked for 9 months. I blinked. 12 to 14? I asked. She nodded. Calm. Confident. Conservative estimate. Conservative. My father once told me, anything above 8% consistently should make you squint. I didn't squint. I listened. She leaned forward. This is the kind of opportunity that separates people who stay comfortable from people who build real wealth. I sniffed. Not dramatically. Just once. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did. She slid a document toward me. It looked official. Logos. Legal language. Signatures. But something about the wording felt soft. Vague. Phrases like anticipated yield and market-adjusted performance environment. I asked, is it registered? She smiled again. Private placement. Doesn't require public registration. Technically true. I knew just enough to know that could be real. But my chest felt tight. Is there an office? I asked. Downtown, she said quickly. Temporary suite while expansion is underway.
Temporary suite.
Another sniff. She placed her hand over mine. I wouldn't bring this to you if I didn't believe in it. And honestly, I'd love for us to grow together. There it was. Not just money. I didn't say yes that night. I said I'd think about it. She looked disappointed. Not angry. Just a slight downturn at the corners of her mouth. There's a limited window, she added softly. The fund closes next Friday. Time pressure. That word echoed in my head long after she left. Friday night, I drove to my parents' house in Naperville. My dad still lives in the same brick colonial where I grew up. The porch light flickers every few minutes. He refuses to fix it because he says it keeps people alert. We sat at the kitchen table. Same oak table from my childhood. Same scratch on the left side from when I tried to carve my initials at 13. He poured 2 cups of black coffee. "What's on your mind?" he asked. I scratched my left ear twice. He froze. He hadn't seen that signal in almost 30 years. Then I tapped the table once with my index finger. His eyes changed. Not panic. Focus. "Start talking," he said quietly. I told him everything. The fund name, the return percentage, the $240,000 minimum, the 9-month lock, the temporary suite, the limited window. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he leaned back and folded his hands. "What's the business address?" he asked. I pulled out the folder and handed it to him. He read silently for about 4 minutes. Then he sniffed. Just once. "Unregistered," he said. "No sec filing. No Form D reference. Language is intentionally vague. And this address." He pulled out his phone. 30 seconds later, he turned the screen toward me. It was a picture of a UPS store.
Suite 214.
"That's a mailbox," he said. My stomach dropped. "But she's my girlfriend," I said. The word sounded fragile. He looked at me carefully. "Son, scammers don't wake up thinking they're villains. They wake up thinking they deserve something." I swallowed. He continued scanning the document. "See this clause? Projected return subject to proprietary performance adjustments. That's legal smoke." He paused again. "What's her full name?" I told him. He typed. Another long silence. Then he exhaled slowly. "She's been linked to 2 dissolved LLCs in the last 4 years. Both connected to private capital ventures. Both shut down after less than 12 months. "Shut down how?" I asked. "No forward activity. No assets reported." I felt heat rise in my face. "Are you saying she's scamming me?" He didn't answer directly. He looked at me and said, "Are you willing to help stop it?" The question hung there. I thought about her laugh. The way she touched my arm. The future trips we talked about. Then I thought about $240,000. 15 years of work. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I'll help." He nodded once. "Good. Then we do this clean." That was the night my father stopped being just my dad and became an investigator again. And I stopped being a boyfriend. The next week, I agreed to meet Alyssa to discuss final commitment. I also turned on the voice memo app in my phone before she arrived. I hated myself a little when I did it. But I remembered something my father used to say when I was small and scared of thunderstorms. If something feels wrong, your body knows before your brain does. And my body had been sniffing for weeks. The meeting was set for Tuesday at 7:15 p.m. Same kitchen table. Same overhead light that hums faintly if you listen closely. I vacuumed that afternoon. Wiped down the counters. Set out 2 glasses of water like we were about to discuss wedding plans instead of a $250,000 decision. At 7:12, I turned on the voice memo app. At 7:14, I placed my phone face down near the fruit bowl. At 7:16, she knocked. She walked in smiling, carrying the same white folder. "You look serious," she teased. "I am," I said. We sat. She opened the folder slowly, confidently, like someone who had done this before, which I would later learn she had. "So," she began, "have you decided?" I leaned back, calm, curious. "I just want to understand everything," I said. "Explain it again." That's something my dad drilled into me over the weekend. Make her talk. The more someone explains a lie, the more it frays. She launched into her pitch. Smooth, practiced. Lakeshore Private Capital Fund focuses on short-term commercial real estate bridge lending. We secure properties below market value, provide capital, flip or refinance within 9 months. "And the returns?" I asked. 12 to 14%. Conservative. Conservative again. "Guaranteed," I said softly. She hesitated. Just a flicker. "Nothing is guaranteed. But our historical performance has never dipped below 11.8. Specific number. Memorable. Probably it's more of an administrative suite.
Suite 214.
I asked casually. Her eyes sharpened just slightly. Yes. At the UPS store? The silence that followed felt heavier than anything she'd said all night. Her jaw tightened, just for a fraction of a second. Then she laughed. "Oh my God," she said. "Did you Google us?" "Yeah." She leaned back, crossed her arms. "You don't trust me." There it was. Emotional pivot. "It's not about trust," I said evenly. "It's about $240,000. She studied my face, measuring. "You know," she said quietly, "most men in your position would jump at this. Most men didn't grow up in my house." That landed. She shifted tactics. "You said you wanted us to build something long-term," she said. "This is how we do that. I brought you in because I care about you." Care. The word sounded hollow now. I leaned forward. "Is the fund registered?" "It doesn't need to be." That wasn't my question. Her lips pressed thin. "It's a private placement," she repeated. "And the Form D filing?" She blinked. "I don't handle compliance personally," she said quickly. "But you handle $240,000 transfers?" Her breathing changed, slightly faster. "Why are you interrogating me?" she snapped. There it was. The crack. I stayed calm. "Because I checked. There's no registration. No filing. The address is a mailbox. And your last 2 LLCs dissolved within a year." Her face drained of color. For 3 full seconds, she said nothing. Then she stood up abruptly. "You had me investigated?" "No," I said quietly. "My father did." That's when something shifted behind her eyes. Not fear. Calculation. "So this is about him?" she asked. "It's about the truth." She grabbed the folder, stuffing papers back inside. "You think you're smarter than me?" she hissed. "No," I said. "I think you underestimated me." Another long silence. Then she tried one last move. "You're making a mistake," she said softly. "Opportunities like this don't come twice." I almost laughed. Instead, I asked one final question. "How many other investors are there?" She hesitated. 8 currently committed. Names? Confidential. Amounts? She looked at me like she wanted to disappear or attack. "Why does that matter?" she demanded. "Because if this collapses," I said quietly, "it won't just be me." She froze. That was the moment I knew. Not because she confessed, but because she didn't deny it. She left without saying goodbye. At 7:58 p.m., the door shut behind her. At 8:01 p.m., I forwarded the recording to my father. The next 72 hours moved fast. My father contacted a former colleague who now worked with the state's financial crimes unit. By Thursday afternoon, they had subpoenaed business registration records. By Friday morning, they confirmed what we suspected. No fund registration. No active lending portfolio. No commercial properties. The performance reports were recycled templates. And the 8 current investors? Real people. Total invested, $912,000. My father showed me the spreadsheet. Column A, name. Column B, amount. Column C, date transferred. 1 retired school principal. 2 small business owners. A widow from Peoria who liquidated part of her IRA. I stared at the numbers. I had almost been column I. Friday at 3:42 p.m., they asked me to come in and sign a formal statement. Saturday at 9:18 a.m., they executed a warrant. She was arrested in her apartment in River North. I wasn't there. I didn't want to be. But I heard later she kept insisting it was a misunderstanding. That the market downturn had temporarily delayed performance. That she had every intention of paying everyone back.
Intention.
My father once told me, "Fraudsters live in future tense." That night, I sat alone in my kitchen. Same table. Same hum of the overhead light. I poured a glass of water and laughed once under my breath. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. I had almost wired away 15 years of work because someone touched my hand and said, Us. And the worst part? For a moment, I still missed her. That's the thing nobody tells you about betrayal. You don't just lose money. You lose the version of the future you imagined. The first time she called me from jail, I didn't answer. I watched the phone vibrate on the kitchen counter. Unknown number. 10:22 p.m. I let it go to voicemail. She didn't leave one. The second call came the next morning at 8:03 a.m. I was at work, reviewing a shipment discrepancy. 20 pallets short. $14,600 in material floating somewhere between Milwaukee and Chicago. Real problems. Concrete problems. My phone buzzed again. I stepped outside. Cold air. Diesel smell from a passing truck. I answered. Silence for a second. Then her voice. You ruined my life. No hello. Just that. I leaned against the brick wall of the warehouse. I didn't do anything, I said calmly. You recorded me, she snapped. You asked me for $240,000. That wasn't illegal. The part where the fund didn't exist was. She exhaled sharply. I could hear noise behind her. Metal doors. Distant voices. You think you're a hero? She said. You think you saved people? I know I didn't lose my retirement. Silence again. Then softer. You could have just said no. I did. She didn't respond to that. Instead, she shifted. You know I cared about you. There it was again. Care. Even now, sitting in a holding cell, she was selling something. I don't think you know what that word means, I said. She hung up. Over the next 3 months, the investigation widened. They uncovered bank transfers routed through 2 shell accounts in Nevada. They found marketing templates reused from a dissolved venture in 2021. They found email chains where she pressured older investors with phrases like, "This closes Friday. I'd hate for you to miss generational wealth. You deserve this opportunity." Deserve. My father showed me part of the case file one evening at his house. We sat at that same oak table. She wasn't stupid, he said. She studied psychology. She targeted people who felt overlooked. Like me? I asked. He looked at me carefully. You weren't overlooked, he said. You were lonely. That hit harder than anything she'd done. The 8 victims were interviewed. One of them, the retired principal, had invested $150,000, almost his entire post-tax pension withdrawal. He told investigators, "She reminded me of my daughter." That sentence stuck with me. I had almost said something similar. The total loss confirmed, $912,000. They froze what remained in her accounts. About $187,000 left. The rest had been spent. Luxury rent, travel, designer purchases. Lifestyle inflation funded by trust. When the indictment came down, the charges included wire fraud, securities fraud, and aggravated identity deception. Maximum exposure, 20 years. Her attorney reached out once, indirectly. They wanted to know if I'd consider providing a statement acknowledging personal relationship complexity. I declined. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. The hearing was in November. I sat in the back row. She wore a gray suit. Hair pulled back. No navy dress this time. No palish charm. She glanced at me once. Not with warmth. Not with regret. With irritation. Like I had disrupted her timeline. The prosecutor laid out the evidence methodically. The fake address, the lack of registration, the fabricated performance reports, the recorded conversation. When they played the audio clip where she said, "Our historical performance has never dipped below 11.8. A quiet murmur moved through the room. Hearing it in that sterile courtroom was different. No candelaut. No hand on mine. Just words. The judge denied bail. Trial set for early spring. In January, 2 of the victims reached out to me directly. The widow from Peoria wrote an email. She didn't blame me. She thanked me. "If you hadn't spoken up," she wrote, "she would have kept going." I read that sentence 3 times. For weeks after the arrest, I kept replaying everything in my head. What if I hadn't scratched my ear? What if my father had retired without staying connected? What if I'd wired the money before asking questions? The margin between safety and disaster was one uncomfortable conversation. One sniff. After sentencing, I walked outside the courthouse. It was windy. Chicago wind that cuts through your coat and reminds you you're small. My father stood beside me. He didn't say, "I told you so." He just placed a hand on my shoulder. "You did good," he said. I thought about that. Good. Not revenge. Not victory. Just good. Spring came slowly that year. The snow melted in uneven patches across my driveway, like hesitation. I spent more evenings at home. No fund folders on the table. No polished sales pitch across from me. Just quiet. For the first few weeks after sentencing, I kept expecting some emotional explosion inside me. Rage. Triumph. Relief so strong it would knock the wind out of me. Instead, I felt steady, which surprised me. I had imagined revenge as something loud. A slammed gavel. A dramatic confession. Maybe even her looking at me in court and realizing what she'd lost. That never happened. She never looked broken. She looked inconvenienced. And that realization was its own kind of education. One night in April, I sat with my father on his back porch. The porch light still flickered every few minutes. He still refused to fix it. We were drinking cheap beer. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "I think so." He nodded once. "You know," he said, "most people who get close to fraud don't talk about it. They feel embarrassed." "I almost wired her the money," I admitted. "But you didn't." That was the difference between a cautionary tale and a lesson. I thought about the widow from Peoria, the retired principal, the small business owners who trusted a confident voice and a clean folder. The hardest part wasn't that she tried to take my money. It was that she used something softer as leverage. Belonging. That's what I'd really been investing in. Over the summer, I started dating again. Slowly. Carefully. No more exclusive opportunities at the kitchen table. On the third date with someone new, she mentioned a crypto startup her friend was involved in. High returns. Early access. I smiled and said, "That's interesting. Send me the registration documents." She laughed. But she sent them. They were real. That's the difference between enthusiasm and manipulation. One welcomes questions. The other resents them. I also reorganized my finances. I met with an independent fiduciary advisor. Someone with no commissions, no product incentives. We reviewed my $310,000 portfolio. Diversified index funds. Bonds. Real estate exposure through regulated REITs. Nothing flashy. Nothing conservative 12 to 14%. Just steady growth. And here's the part one wish someone had explained to me earlier. When someone promises high, consistent returns, they're playing with a formula that looks like this. Equals 1 plus a tongue sticking out, 1 plus R. T. Compound growth. It's powerful. It's beautiful. But when the rate R is exaggerated beyond reality, the numbers become fantasy. On paper, 14% sounds life-changing. In the real world, sustained double-digit returns with low risk are almost mythical. Scammers know most people don't question the math. They question themselves instead. Maybe I'm just not sophisticated enough. Maybe this is how the wealthy think. That's the trap. The real wealthy people I've met since then, they ask boring questions. They demand documentation. They walk away fast. And they never rush. About a year after the arrest, I received a letter from the restitution office. The victims would likely recover around 20 cents on the dollar over time. 20 cents. That number bothered me for days. Justice doesn't always equal restoration. But it does create boundaries. She couldn't do it again. Not easily. That mattered. One evening, I opened the old white folder she had left behind, the copy I kept. I flipped through the polished pages. The vague language. The confident projections. The fabricated historical performance. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt recognition. The red flags were there from the beginning. Unrealistic returns framed as conservative. An unregistered fund with no public filings. A business address that led to a mailbox. Pressure tied to a closing window. resistance to independent review, and the most important one, a subtle feeling in my chest that something wasn't aligned. Instinct isn't mystical. It's pattern recognition we can't articulate yet. When I was 9 years old, my father taught me to scratch my ear and tap the table if I felt unsafe. At the time, I thought he was training me for kidnappers or alleyways. Turns out, he was training me for dinner conversations. People sometimes ask if I regret turning her in. The honest answer? No. But I do regret ignoring the first small signal. Not because it almost cost me money, because it almost cost me trust in myself. The best revenge wasn't watching her get sentenced. It was keeping my $240,000. It was protecting the retirement I worked 15 years to build. It was learning that love and due diligence are not opposites. They can and should exist together. Now, when someone makes a promise that sounds too smooth, I don't get angry. I get curious. And sometimes, if I'm alone at my kitchen table and the overhead light hums just right, I'll scratch my left ear twice. Just to remind myself, trust is earned. Verification is kindness to your future self. And if something feels wrong, sniff, listen, walk away. If you've ever felt that quiet tension when someone pitches you an opportunity, don't ignore it. Ask for registration documents. Verify business addresses. Refuse time pressure. Demand independent review. And most of all, don't let the desire to belong override the facts in front of you. Cold revenge isn't about destroying someone. It's about refusing to destroy yourself. That was the real inheritance my father gave me. Not paranoia. Preparation. A year after the sentencing, I visited my parents again for Thanksgiving. Same oak table. Same scratch from when I tried to carve my initials at 13. Same porch light flickering like it's trying to decide whether to retire. My dad carved the turkey slowly, methodically. He still does everything like he's building a case. Halfway through dinner, he looked at me and said, "You know why I taught you those signals?" I shrugged. "Because you thought the world was dangerous?" He shook his head. "Because I knew one day you'd love someone." That caught me off guard. He set the knife down. When you investigate strangers, it's easy to be skeptical. When you investigate someone you care about, your brain fights your instincts. That's when people lose everything. I thought about that for a long time after dinner. He wasn't training me to detect crime. He was training me to detect conflict between emotion and evidence. I don't tell this story often in real life. Not because I'm ashamed. Because it sounds dramatic. Girlfriend. Fake fund. Nearly $240,000. Arrest. But here's the truth. Most fraud doesn't look dramatic. It looks polite. It looks like someone you trust explaining something confidently. It looks like a limited time opportunity. It looks like a relationship. That's what makes it dangerous. Financial fraud has patterns. They're not mysterious. They're mathematical, psychological, repetitive. If someone promises stable, high returns that outpace the market without explaining risk, pause. If the investment is unregistered and they discourage independent verification, pause. If the address leads to a mailbox, pause. If they push you to act before you've had time to consult a neutral third party, pause. If your chest tightens and you can't explain why, pause. You don't have to accuse. You don't have to confront immediately. You just have to slow down. Time pressure is oxygen for scams. Remove it and the structure weakens. Sometimes people ask if I still believe in love after that. Yeah. But I believe in questions more. The woman I'm seeing now knows about my father's old signals. I told her on our 5th date. She laughed and said, "So if you scratch your ear twice, I should worry?" I smiled. "Only if I sniff too." We both laughed. That's the difference between transparency and manipulation. One survives light. The other needs shadows. If you take anything from my story, let it be this. The best revenge is not dramatic exposure. It's disciplined restraint. It's refusing to wire money when your gut says wait. It's choosing documentation over infatuation. It's protecting 15 years of work from 15 minutes of pressure. I almost became victim number 9. Instead, I became the interruption. And that interruption saved 8 people nearly $1 million more in damage. That's not heroic. It's procedural. It's boring. It's effective. Cold revenge isn't about destroying, it's about standing still long enough to see clearly, then acting through law, not emotion, then walking away without losing yourself. Every now and then, when the house is quiet and the overhead light hums softly, I sit at the kitchen table and think about how close I came. I place my fingers lightly on the wood, tap once, scratch my ear twice, sniff, still here, still solvent, still trusting but verified. And that's more than enough. There isn't another hidden twist. No secret inheritance. No dramatic prison confession. No last-minute apology letter written in perfect cursive. Real life doesn't always wrap itself in cinematic closure. Sometimes it just settles. About 18 months after everything ended, I ran into someone who used to work with her. It was at a networking breakfast downtown. Folding chairs. Weak coffee. Name tax. He recognized my name. "You're the guy from that Lakeshore thing, right?" he asked carefully. "Yeah," I said. He shifted uncomfortably. "She approached me too," he admitted. "Said I could help recruit investors. Commission-based." "How much commission?" I asked. 5%. 5% of $240,000 is $12,000. 5% of $912,000 is $45,600. Recruitment incentives. That's how these things scale. He looked at me and said quietly, "I almost did it." I nodded. Almost is a powerful word. It means you paused long enough to step back. He hesitated before adding, "She was very convincing." "I know," I said. We stood there for a moment in silence. Then he asked, "How did you catch it?" I didn't say, because my father was a financial crime investigator. I didn't say, because I recorded her. I said something simpler. I asked for proof and waited. That's it. Most fraud collapses under patient silence. There's one more thing I haven't said. For months after her arrest, I kept wondering whether any part of her feelings had been real. That question haunted me more than the money, because if it was all fake, then I had been blind. If some of it was real, then she had chosen greed over connection. Both options hurt. Eventually, I realized something uncomfortable. It doesn't matter. Intent doesn't repair damage. And affection doesn't excuse deception. You can care about someone and still recognize they are unsafe for you. That's a hard lesson in your 30s. Maybe harder than losing money. Today, my retirement accounts sit just over $370,000. Not because of any miracle investment. Because of consistency. Because I didn't chase 12 to 14%. Because I let time do what it's designed to do. There's nothing flashy about that number. But it's honest. And I sleep well. If you're between 30 and 65, building a life, raising kids, supporting aging parents, trying to balance opportunity with caution, hear me clearly. Scams don't just target greed. They target hope. They target fatigue. They target the quiet voice that says, "Maybe this is my break." There is nothing wrong with wanting a break. There is something wrong with ignoring documentation because you're afraid to look unsophisticated. Ask anyway. The right people won't punish you for asking. The wrong people will reveal themselves when you do. My father is older now, slower on the stairs, still sharp. A few weeks ago, I asked him if he ever felt tired of suspecting people. He smiled. "I don't suspect people," he said. "I verify systems." That stuck with me. Verification isn't cynicism. It's respect for reality. So here's my quiet ending. I loved someone who tried to defraud me. I trusted my instincts. I partnered with someone experienced. I followed the law instead of emotion. 8 other people stopped losing more money. And I kept my future intact. No explosions. No shouting matches. No dramatic revenge speech. Just a scratch of the ear. A tap on the table. A recording. And a decision to choose evidence over infatuation. If something in your life feels slightly off, financially or otherwise, don't panic. Don't accuse blindly. Pause. Ask for clarity. Seek independent advice. Slow the timeline. Fraud hates daylight and patience. And sometimes the strongest move you can make is doing nothing until the truth shows itself. Sniff. Still here. That's enough.